Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the World Lemur Festival and this panel discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. We, the Lemur Conservation Network team, are very happy to host this virtual event. Today, we will discuss the importance of collaboration in lemur conservation. I would like to introduce and thank our staff, our moderator today, Lucia, Lynn. She is answering our technical stuff with Laura. Thank you so much. And we have also our guest speakers. It's because of our great guest speakers that we will have this event today. We will get the opportunity to listen to the incredible work that they are doing in Madagascar. So thank you so much for joining us. Before starting, the Minister of the Environment and Sustainable Development has a message for us through a short video. Lynn?
Les lémuriens sont parmi les animaux les plus emblématiques de la Grande Île et ils sont endémiques de Madagascar. Cependant, selon l'Union internationale pour la conservation de la nature, ou UICN, plus de 98% d'entre eux sont aujourd'hui menacés, dont 31% considérés comme en danger critique d'extinction. Le ministère de l'Environnement et du Développement durable que je dirige est fortement impliqué dans la conservation, dans la préservation et dans la sensibilisation autour de l'importance des lémuriens. Nous avons engagé différents projets de préservation des lémuriens et de la biodiversité dans différents écosystèmes de Madagascar. Néanmoins, cette question de la conservation des lémuriens est une responsabilité partagée. Et c'est pour cela que j'exhorte les différents partenaires, les citoyens, les responsables étatiques à tous les niveaux à se joindre à nous pour cet effort pour sauvegarder les lémuriens de Madagascar. Nous avons besoin du soutien et de la collaboration des différents partenaires techniques et financiers, mais aussi des organisations de la société civile, ainsi que le secteur privé. J'appelle particulièrement la communauté scientifique, les chercheurs à Madagascar, mais aussi à l'étranger, pour contribuer à cet effort collectif de préservation des lémuriens, ces espèces emblématiques de Madagascar. Mesdames et messieurs, à l'aube de la célébration de la Journée nationale des lémuriens et la célébration à travers le monde, nous lançons un appel à la solidarité et à la responsabilité de chacun afin de renforcer nos efforts déjà entrepris pour la protection de ces animaux emblématiques que sont les lémuriens. Nous sommes heureux de célébrer les lémuriens durant cette semaine à Madagascar et dans le monde.
Yeah, so this is the message from the ministry. I would like to thank the Ministry of the Environment for this great video, and also we are so grateful for the minister for this message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As Sen said, we're really excited to have such great panelists today, and that the Ministry of Environment was able to send a video trying to just make their voice heard, as how it's important to have collaboration from all different levels and from the state as well. It's also really important to say that the Ministry of Environment and Development is embracing every time more the World Lemur Festival, and that's something that really excites us. And I think it's a really good place to start. Before we start with the questions, if we can please ask the panelists to introduce themselves. Jonah, can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Lucia. Thank you, Sehenu. I am Jonah Ratsimbazafy. I am the president of the Madagascar Research and Study Group, which is called GERP. And I am also the vice co-chair of the IUCN Primate Specialist Group for Madagascar. And I am the director of Houston Zoo Madagascar program. and I'm a faculty teacher at the University of Antananarivo and Tuamasina. That's all for me. I am native of Madagascar and I live here in Madagascar, and I am born to save the lemurs. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Russ Vittermeyer. I'm the Chief Conservation Officer for the organization Rewild, formerly Global Wildlife Conservation. I'm also the chair of the IUCN Species Survival Commission Primate Specialist Group, and I've been going to Madagascar since 1984.
Thank you. Pat? Sorry, you're mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. I'm a distinguished professor at Stony Brook University. I'm also the founder and the executive officer of the Central ValBio Research Station in Razafindratsima, near Razafindratsima National Park. I'm a member of the Species Specialist Group and the primates at IUCN. And I have, like Russ, the first time I ever came to Madagascar was 1984. And I have been working very hard for conservation of particularly rainforests in Madagascar since that time.
Thank you very much. Onja, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Onja Razafindratsima. I'm from Madagascar actually, but currently I'm working at the University of California in Berkeley as an assistant professor. And I co-founded the association Saina in Madagascar with several Malagasy conservation biologists. We have a mission of empowering Malagasy scientists and promoting scientific research in Madagascar for the conservation of biodiversity in Madagascar.
Thank you very much. And Cortni?
Hi, everyone. I'm Cortni Borgerson. I'm a professor at Montclair State University and a board member for MAHERY, which is Madagascar Health and Environmental Research. And our work primarily focuses here on lemur hunting, but I'm also collaborating with a lot of local organizations and communities trying to develop applied interventions which reduce both lemur hunting and improve food security in Madagascar. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, we have these great panelists and we are so grateful for it. We really want to emphasize all your attendance and your willingness to be here today. And today we're going to talk about collaboration in lemur conservation and why that's so important. So we want to start with Jonah. Jonah, for you, what is the importance of lemurs in Madagascar and why is it so important to celebrate the World Lemur Festival?
First, let me say that lemurs are important for Madagascar because it is unique for Madagascar. And lemurs are our tourist attraction. So tourists come to Madagascar that means that to bring money to raise the economy of Madagascar. Lemurs also play important role in dispersing seeds and pollinating some plants. So they can play important role in the ecological services. And Madagascar, we don't have Pyramid Egypt, Wall of China, or Eiffel Tower, and Statue of Liberty. Those are the tourist attraction for people to visit those countries. But we have lemurs, our millions of richness to attract tourists. We don't have millions of things here, but lemurs are of millions of richness. So this is important because people of Madagascar can have better life by having the lemurs in their backyard. And why is important to celebrate? Because lemurs, again, is a patrimony, international patrimony and national patrimony. We should be proud of having them in our backyard. Unfortunately, they are facing very, very tough time. And as the ministry said, more than 95% of them are endangered. So we have to work very hard. We have to celebrate. We have to tell everyone, the entire world, and the Malagasy first here to the value of those lemurs before it is too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonah. Russ, Rewild has a collaborative approach to scale impact and make the NGO's conservation targets. Could you please tell us a little bit more about why Rewild has adopted this approach and a bit of like an example of how this collaboration has worked?
Yeah, of course. Before I respond to that question, I'd just like to add to what Jonah said, that lemurs are Madagascar's great wildlife ambassadors. I don't think there's any country that has a group of animals that are as visible and as representative of the country as the lemurs are for Madagascar. Maybe the giant panda for China, but there's only one species of giant panda. There are 112 different kinds of lemurs and counting. So yeah, I think that there's no question that when people think about Madagascar around the world, they think first and foremost of the lemurs. And I think that's a tremendous economic asset for Madagascar as well. Maybe we can say a little bit more about ecotourism later. Our collaborative approach is very simple. Basically, we work with the in-country organizations focused on conservation, whether they're NGOs or local communities or the government itself. Unlike many of the other larger international conservation organizations, and I should point out that I worked for WWF and I worked for Conservation International for a long time, where the approach was to have national offices of the organizations based in countries like Madagascar. Our approach now, recognizing that there's great capacity actually in many countries, and particularly in Madagascar. So our approach is to work directly with those national and local NGOs that exist within the country, support them, and not create our own structures within the country. And we also believe very much in the value of small grant mechanisms. So rather than dropping large amounts of money on the government to then be distributed to NGOs and to other actors, which is a valid approach, but we believe that the urgency in Madagascar now is so high that we like to be able to deliver support to different actors in the conservation arena very, very quickly through very unbureaucratic small grant mechanisms.
And do you think that like this funding approach is something quite common, or is something that Rewild is really taking the lead on? Because well, I'm just saying, because sometimes international big NGOs have this sometimes gap between more like local work in terms of funding. So that's why I'm asking if this is something that you believe that Rewild is taking the lead on, or is something that we are seeing more.
Well, I think, I hope we're going to see more of it. I think in certain ways we are taking the lead on this, because we believe that in biodiversity conservation, more than in any other sector, the real action is on the ground in the remote areas where most of the wildlife occurs, with the local communities, with the local NGOs that are doing the real work. And very often those organizations, those communities get only a little trickle down of large scale funding that comes in. And what we're trying to do is create a mechanism where we can directly support those small on the ground actors, small but absolutely critical for biodiversity conservation, with minimum bureaucracy, with the least bureaucracy that we can possibly have, and still follow the legislation, the laws of our country and the donor agency.
And so just because this panel will be shared through our platforms and many of our members will follow this panel, like what are this process? How can many of the members or local actors can approach to Rewild to have more this type of collaborations?
Well, if you have a priority issue, a priority area, a priority species that you're working on, with lemurs, for example, you can send us a proposal. I very much favor short proposals, no longer than 2 pages, because if they're longer than that, I probably won't read them. And we can usually turn that around within a matter, we can approve it within a matter of days or weeks, and we can generally disperse the funding within a couple of months at most, and sometimes more rapidly than that. We have to follow legislation in the US, like the Patriots Act and things like that, so we have to have certain forms filled out. But I don't think there's any funding mechanism that moves more quickly and with more agility than the ones that we have in place. So, and I believe that is absolutely essential now in biodiversity conservation if we're going to be effective.
Yeah, we have to be quick, right? Thank you very much. Pat, so Central ValBio, I think it's such a great example of how multi-level collaboration for conservation in Madagascar is. Can you please tell us a little bit more how Central ValBio has been able to engage with different levels of key lemur conservation actors in Madagascar?
Yes, our Central ValBio is a research station that's based in science and collaborating very closely on every level, whether it's with the Ministry of the Environment in Montana or community associations like the FIMARA, which is the medicinal plant organization that works together, or our Women's Weaver Group organization. So we work very closely, not only with scientists, but also with people and help to train people. It's we have started in Radamafan for now 35 years, working at three levels with the local people in addition to the region and the federal government. We have worked with the researchers and trained so many Malagasy, and one of them is Jonah, and another one is Onja, who have worked at the research station before they took off with their own careers. I think that's very important capacity building, working with the local people. We have over 130 staff that are working in reforestation, in education. The future is the kids and getting them educated and how important those lemurs are. And also working very closely with health, and how anybody that's sick knows that health is at the basis of everything, the economy, and whether you can study at school, everything. So we do health, reforestation, restoration ecology, really, for the economy, and working in fragments and expanding fragments, all of these things at the same time. So it's a big collaborative effort, and we work very closely with Russ and this organization that he is working with. It's targeted to come in and help at this time when we need the help the most. COVID has put a tremendous dent in our conservation efforts. I mean, it is tragic. I just arrived in Madagascar. Already, I can see the impact of this COVID on the economy and on conservation, because all of that ecotourism money that was coming in, that had supported the projects that were doing so well, suddenly, boom, everything has changed. There's no funding anymore. And so that's where Russ and his organization can help, and other organizations to come right in and help when we need the help now, to save those lemurs, because they need help now more than they ever have before.
Yes, and it is really interesting because you're illustrating not only like Central ValBio's multi-level approach of collaboration, but also like multi-sector. So you emphasize on the health sector and how it's so important to take into consideration other local needs, that if we don't fulfill those needs or fill those gaps, we won't see those conservation outcomes we're expecting. And I think now with COVID is more evident than ever. So that's a really nice and very illustrative example of what we're trying to have a talk today, what we're trying to refer to today. So thank you very much. And continue on to talk a little bit more about capacity building and development. Onja, can you talk a little bit about your capacity development and building work with students and researchers in Madagascar?
Thank you for the question. As Pat already said earlier, we really need to train Malagasy students, and specifically, we need to train more of like the future conservation leaders. So that's where I've been focusing a little bit of my like capacity building activities, training Malagasy students, and specifically in research mentoring. So I've mentored and trained graduate students who are preparing master and PhD degrees in various aspects of research, including like experimental design, field techniques, data analysis, even like writing manuscript and applying for grants. I want to say like the unique way I'm doing it is that like the student participates in my research program to gain field research as a research assistant first, which everybody doing research in Madagascar is doing. But then the way it doesn't stop there, but then they develop the independent research project under my guidance. So they don't stop us being research assistant and gaining field techniques, experience or things like that. But I help them throughout the process of getting funding, collecting data, analyzing data, and then publishing the result. So like really getting that research mentoring from start to finish. This approach I want to say that this approach has been successful because several of my Malagasy mentees have won awards and grants, and they have published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. And I feel like that way of research mentoring is very important because it provides an opportunity for Malagasy students to become independent researchers and leaders in conservation research in Madagascar, which we really need. We need to train Malagasy conservation leaders. We don't need to train more people with just some techniques and becoming assistants to the conservation leaders going to Madagascar and needing research assistants. We need Malagasy students leading their independent research, leading their independent conservation work, and be the conservation leaders in Madagascar. And so I think it will be great. It's a great opportunity for them to gain that experience of a project leader. And so one thing too is that the training does not stay with the Malagasy mentee because they also tend to have this mindset of like, they want to help others also to become like they are. So it's not like, oh, I'm mentoring a student once and that's it, but like that mentee will mentor another student in the future. I was a product of a mentee of somebody else doing research in Madagascar. As I was a student in Madagascar, a master's student, I was mentored in research from start to finish doing my master, and then that continued. And I had that mindset of like, oh, I want to help another Malagasy student. And so you create this positive cascading impact from generation to generation of Malagasy conservation biologists. So yeah, that's one of the many capacity building activities that I've been doing.
That's fantastic, thank you. I think you're referring to Malagasy conservation leaders, and that's something super important that I think it's changing a lot in Madagascar. Like a lot of foreigner scientists and conservations are every time bringing more like a platform for Malagasy conservation actors. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like what is currently happening towards that goal? What is some of the challenges of getting to there?
The challenges of getting toward having more conservation leaders, is that the question?
Malagasy conservation leaders, yes.
Funding, that's one of the main challenges. We want to do a lot of things. We want to train many students, but there is limited funding because these students also need funding to do their own research. And sometimes it's hard to get funding. And also I think another challenge would be like getting people involved in mentoring Malagasy students. And I'm talking not just like, I'm talking about like researchers, like scientists going to Madagascar and doing their research. I really encourage like all scientists to go beyond that field training and really into like helping the students like becoming these independent conservation leaders. I think we lacking a little bit of that, because like a lot of people go to Madagascar, hire student as research assistant, and then it ends there. And it's just like the student gets to experience this field, like, you know, like having this field work experience, which is really great. They need that, but like amassing a lot of like experience in field work, it's not enough. Because they want to do something else. It's just like they don't have that opportunity to go beyond having a lot of experience, and that's it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay. Yes, thank you. That's great. And actually, in touching that line, I will actually want to extend that question, Suzanne. Sorry for surprising you, but I think that a lot of what Onja is saying, it's about empowering students to be able to like take the challenge that we know there is a lack of funding. We know it's a hard work. We know that we have to like represent their own research and their own conservation efforts, but there is some empowering that has to be done for that. So can you say how we can empower more students to like get in touch with people like Onja and say like, we want to work together, we want to do research together, I want to be a Malagasy conservation leader. How can we empower more students and young researchers to do that?
Yeah, thank you, Lucia. Yeah, we always talk about this because, as Onja said, I think also because of the COVID crisis, we realized how much we need not just funding, but we need things get done on the ground, and we are so how can you do without our collaborators outside Madagascar? How can we do the research outside our collaborators? And I think it's also the empowering. It's great, but we as Malagasy, we have also to rethink about how can we be involved and really involved. And as Onja said, yes, we can always do research assistance or do work on conservation, but it's really up to us to get things done, and we have to work hard, really hard. Yeah, that's collaboration means that we have to get out what would be the real benefits, and to ensure that we do the real work conservation on the ground. Because at the end of the day, if we lose forests, we lose lemurs, it's for us, for Madagascar. So as Malagasy, we have this stress and the pressure. It's not always, oh no, we don't have funds, no, nowhere, no work, no, let's so no, we have to work now, and we have to be involved and empowering. We have to get the support and funds, but we should work and be proud of what we accomplished at the end of the day. Yeah, so that's I think with COVID we realized that, so we get the stuff done.
Oh yeah, it's good that from this bad, horrible situation going on in Madagascar right now with all the COVID effects, like this is something that has been motivating, empowering Malagasy people to actually say like, okay, this is a waking up call, or this just activated more my willingness to do something about it. So let's hope that we can see a lot of waves of new empowered local Malagasy researchers and conservationists doing all of the work, all the work that we need. And now going to the line to on the ground, Cortni, collaboration is very important to do so very extensively and be able to have a lot of engagement with the local communities. And in Madagascar, you had a lot of experience with this. How do you ensure that your work in the ground like truly benefits communities as well? And not only the conservation objectives that you have, and like what is one of the solutions that all of this engagement and work with the communities can be sustainable and can be and the outcomes can be for more like a longer term.
First, I wanted to say this falls into a lot of the things that we've been talking about so far. And I would like to reflect a lot of what Onja and Saina are saying. And this extends all the way down to the community level, because the work is, I mean, right now, one of the lovely things about COVID is that Madagascar, people who are working in applied research and conservation who look like me, stepped out of the way. And it's not so much even capacity building as letting the capacity that's already there take charge and do the work that really is such a central feature of what's going on. For me, the local community collaborators that we're working with are my most important co-authors in my research at the community level, and also collaborators in practice, because for that work to be effective in the long term, it needs to be true community driven work, not individuals hired as assistants, right? But in managerial positions where they're truly allowed to shine and drive what's happening in the field. Since much of our work is actually attempting to understand and drive local human behavior, we can't do that unless it's being driven by the actual actors in the site itself. And that means for a lot of us coming from the outside, it means operating in Malagasy. It means entirely hiring out of the communities that we work in, so that our team members are, decentralized. They're living in the communities where they work. They have their extended family networks. It also helps empower faces in Madagascar that aren't often included within those to be able to take part and to, as mothers, right, as community members, drive conservation in ways where they can do that with their families and their communities, and but by their side in their own ancestral lands. I think it also depends on collaborating with the communities in ways where they're involved in your grant writing. They're co-authored on grants with their names on there. They're co-authored in publications so that they're able to move up, so that the face that we see in Madagascar going forward is also faces from the communities that border the protected areas there. And that means spending a lot of time in very, very remote places and starting that empowerment particularly early. Everywhere from scholarships coming out of APP, right, to get people into, middle school programs and, computer and tech development and training very, very young, to right now, even in the States at Montclair State, where I'm based, where we're trying to recruit, local community scholars to come and do their doctorate programs in environmental science and management so that they can go back into these areas that are underrepresented. And that collaboration takes place across the whole arc. So I think because us working there is affecting what people do, having true community members whose livelihoods depend on these be a part of it from the very beginning in design allows for our work to be more effective in conservation and sustainable in the long term, because that way we understand the reasons why people are doing what they do, the alternatives that do or do not exist to those behaviors on the ground, the real barriers that exist for individuals to do those other behaviors. And then we can work together to help remove those barriers so that in the end, our conservation practice becomes helping and empowering communities to do the things that they want to do with themselves already. And we're just allowing those ties to be broken so that can happen. And I think that makes a huge commitment. And then also a heck of a lot of data, so that we know it's effective and that we're not just throwing money in places that sound right, but aren't actually working. And that means not only collaborating with our communities that we're doing action, but where we're not. So we have good control and test data, and we can continue the efforts that are really making the biggest change in Madagascar.
Thank you, Cortni. And with the context of COVID, right, that like poaching has increased and deforestation has increased because major needs are now in place, like, and a lot of very harmful narratives on conservation in Madagascar is blaming local people because of these activities, which it's a necessity, because if they don't poach that animal, they might not have anything to have for dinner that night. And this is why so much collaboration with local communities is so important. But how are you, or what has been your experience in this past couple of years with COVID? How can you tell us a little bit, how has that changed, and what are you guys doing in order to try to make that situation better for the conservation outcomes and for the well-being of the communities?
The work that we do would have been impossible if we hadn't been so based in the communities in the first place, because our teams are in the places where they've always been. right? So I think that for anyone going in and starting research, knowing that, that during COVID, everything just kept continuing, right? Because we were there and they were leading the projects that were addressing some of the main drivers of the things that you're talking about increased hunting, increased habitat loss, right? So we're addressing, community food insecurity using traditional methods, we're, the infrastructure and the pieces that are there, all these parts that are locally driven are key, because the same reasons why people were hunting and clearing before COVID are true now during COVID. It's just that those pressures are increasing. Right? So making sure that we're incorporating our understanding with community members from the very beginning, so we truly understand, actually deeply, deeply understand and incorporate those reasons and incentives into our planning, is so important after COVID, before the next COVID. No, it's like all of the time, because it's the same issues. It's just that the volume got turned up, right? So I think the more that we do this, we'll be ready to continue the great work that everyone here is doing, whether we're there or not, whether things are interrupted or not, and that it keeps addressing the same livelihoods, problems, and concerns that we all have, right? And that once you work with the community, it's very easy to understand the actual pressures that are there. And we can use that not as something that's sad or depressing or puts people on two sides, but actually brings everybody together to recognize this interconnectedness of health and forests and people and behavior, because by recognizing that interconnectedness and being driven from the community, it makes fixing it all even more possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I think we're going to open up the floor a bit more. And this is a question for everyone. If you want to respond, just please unmute yourself or raise your hand. But what do you think are some of the main strengths and opportunities of multi-collaboration in Madagascar? And what are some of the biggest challenges that we have at the moment? Who wants to start?
Well, let me start. I think one of the biggest challenges now is for the government in particular to take action to ensure that this unbelievable biodiversity resource that Madagascar has and is unique in the world is not lost. I very much believe that as much as or more than in just about any country around the world, the future economic development and the well-being of the people of Madagascar depends on maintaining and restoring the biodiversity resources that the country has, because they are so special and so unique. And what we're seeing now in places like Mena Bay, it's being eroded very, very quickly. And I have long said that ecotourism, more than anything else, could be the principal economic driver for Madagascar, because it's sustainable, it's renewable, if you maintain the basic biodiversity resource that's there. And if COVID has done us any favors, it has demonstrated very clearly how critically important ecotourism is, both to the local communities who knew it already, but also to the government. I think the government has seen a lot of breakdown in different parts of the country because of the loss of ecotourism. But at the same time, I don't think Madagascar is touching even 5% of the ecotourism potential that exists for the country. And Lucia, as you know well, the model that I see is Costa Rica, right? Costa Rica has done a phenomenal job of developing ecotourism that benefits everyone in the country, from the smallest local landholder to the government. And I think that if Madagascar could look at the Costa Rica model and learn from it and try to institute the same sort of thing in Madagascar, I think it would have enormous potential for the future. Costa Rica is not the only one, but it's probably the longest running and most effective and clearest example of what can be done. So I think that this is something that is absolutely essential for the future. You cannot let the biodiversity resource continue to erode and expect to benefit from it in the future. There has to be action taken at all levels now, but particularly by the government, to really strengthen controls and capacity throughout the country to make sure we don't lose anything more.
I'd like to add another thing, Russ. I think it's so important that we act now. I mean, the fact that we've had this intense drought in the south of Madagascar, people are on the move. They're moving from the south to the north and doing slash and burn and charcoal all the way up. This is a Madagascar that's in crisis. It's always been in crisis, but it's more in crisis than it's ever been. I mean, the most encouraging thing that I've heard, you know, we have a strong program in Ranbafan, but we also have 5 other kind of satellite programs. And one of them is what we call the Lost Rainforest. It's the Vuiburi forest in the central part of Madagascar, where we have collaborated with other NGOs, local NGOs and international NGOs to try to save this special forest. One of the NGOs is MySet, who's been there working on getting this as a protected area, but also of the Phoenix Conservancy, who are basically firefighters from the United States, from Montana. And so what we have done that's been so successful, even during this COVID time, is we put up fire breaks all around this very 2,000 hectares of forest, huge fire breaks. We've started doing reforestation all around this area to give the local people and we've hired the local people. The local people have been hired consistently through the COVID times to plant trees, to make fire breaks. I think we have to increase our scope, increase what we're doing, increase the amount of money that goes to the local villagers, and also increase our understanding of the lemurs. So we can't forget, we're celebrating World Lemur Day. And the fact that we are emphasizing lemurs by creating stamps where everybody in Madagascar can be seeing this iconic symbol of Madagascar every day when they mail any kind of anything. I think, and we've got to do more marketing to the Malagasy people. I think Russ and Jonah and all of us have to make sure that the Malagasy themselves understand how economically important these lemurs can be to them. I think Russ is absolutely right. I mean, if you go across the water, there's millions and millions of tourists every day that come to Africa. Those people should be also coming to Madagascar. They should be improving the economy. And I think that we have to, all of us, we have to work harder and harder right now to increase our abilities to market lemurs, to market ecotourism, to work with the local people at the very basic village level. I think it's very important to do that now.
Yeah, I might add also that ecotourism is so important. I'm sorry, Jonah, just a second. That's so important that Madagascar should adopt structures where ecotourism benefits to channel also like mainly to communities, and that's where the government should have a really strong actions, and it will be very interesting to see also how like people from the different levels in conservation could like support those goals. Sorry, Jonah, you were saying?
Yeah, fine. Okay, thank you, Lucia. First, I just would like to stress on the point that when you said collaboration is always a good word, but here sometimes it's not a collaboration, it's kind of dependence. Dependence, because there is some positive effect of the COVID, because people realize that we have to be careful on how, for example, we use the grants that you received. It's not forever. It could be end sometimes, and that's for during the COVID. Everyone has had a hard time to manage the little grants that they have in hands. So that's a positive. So sometimes it's not a collaboration. It's people think as dependent. It's they work. It's not that's why we'd like to work with our community in a spirit of collaboration, not in a spirit of dependence. That's first thing. And speaking about the challenge and the biggest challenge, I would say if I were a government people, my biggest challenge is how to bring back, how not to lose the hope of the donors, because lots of money have been spent to save Mena Bay, to protect, Karafansk, and now look at what's happened. So if I were a donor, how can I trust that it's going to be handled nicely? So that's the big challenge that the government should express to the world, that they can save what's remain in Mena Bay, so the forest won't lose. We won't lose Mena Bay with all of the endemic species unique of the Karafansk and Mena Bay. So that is a big challenge. And the second thing is, as I said, it's a trust. And it is a trust, and everybody should not lose their hope. And that's what we are still working very hard, as Pat and Ross said. We all very concerned because the big challenge is now a question of time. We don't have much time left. There are very few. We don't have to lose time. There is, and I like the word, and because we are talking now about zero tolerance. Zero tolerance means that if it's a protected area, that should be protected. That should be clear, because we do understand the problem of those poverty, the poor people, the drought, and people move. What is the challenge? The challenge is how can we help those poor community from the south not to destroy, not to invade the protected area of Mena Bay or Karafansk or other protected area, but that should be something very, very a big issue and a big concern. And the government should work very closely with the local community and with the donor to make sure, because most of the fundings are from the outside in Madagascar. So if you lose the support of the international community, what's going to happen to those lemurs? And that's what I said for this World Lemur Festival for this year. We should do something. For example, we have to stop the fire. And how to get to that? Permanent presence in all of the protected area. I know, we know that that's going to be lots of money, but you have no choice right now. We have to save what is left and to put people on permanence on the protected area, to do patrol, to involve the local community, and to improve, of course, the livelihood of the local community. So this is not easy to say that. I still believe that it's not too late to improve, to save the lemurs and the biodiversity of Madagascar, as well as the local, the people, the poor people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonah. We have a question from the Facebook Live. What about the elephant in the room, referring to corruption and organized crime? This is obviously one of the biggest problems for conservation in Madagascar. Just think of the force of Mena Bay and Karafansk currently being annihilated. Does someone wants to refer to that?
I just want to say that because I've just entered Madagascar just a few days ago, and when I entered, there was a major problem with the corruption at the airport, where they found, suitcases and suitcases of tortoises that were being exported. Gold was being exported, and that was like last week. Yes, there is a tremendous amount of corruption.
You found tortoises being exported last week?
Last week was a major problem.
Wow.
And yeah, So yes, this is, I don't know how this can be addressed, but the trade has to be addressed. The trade is not as bad in lemurs, but in wildlife and in gems, etc.
Yeah, the airport has long been a test case for this. It's not a big airport. It should not be at all difficult to control illegal trade coming out of that airport. And yet every year, every few months, there are examples of tortoises. I mean, unbelievable. Gems, I can understand, they're pretty easy to smuggle. But tortoises, you have to wrap them up in bubble wrap, and sometimes you see 50, 60 tortoises stuck into a single suitcase. I mean, how difficult can it be to put controls in place? It just can't be that. It's not the size of Los Angeles or Frankfurt or Tokyo. It's a small airport where that kind of control should be easy. But look, corruption occurs everywhere. And as an American, I have a hard time criticizing another country for corruption because we have some pretty corrupt politicians in this country as well, right? But it is an issue, and it is something that has to be dealt with. It's not something that NGOs can easily deal with. We can call attention to it, but ultimately any kind of efforts to control corruption has to come from the top, has to come at the highest levels of government. Otherwise, it's not going to be effective. But, you know, as I say, we've got the same problem, and very few countries in the world that don't have problems with corruption. But if we're going to deal with it, the leadership has to come from the top.
And do you think that there are lines of communication between government and NGOs, international conventions, about this, talking about this, or is it very hard to have these types of communication and engagement related to corruption and other big systematic issues that Madagascar has?
This is difficult for NGOs. I think that has to come internally from within the country, that the public voice has to be heard on this issue. And then the major donors, the bilateral and multilateral donors, have to exercise their concern. They have to express their concerns about this issue in a very serious way. And sometimes they're hesitant to do so. So yeah, I mean, that is something that really is aside from calling attention to it, it's really beyond the scope of what NGOs can effectively do.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from the audience. Which areas are most crucial today to strengthen conservation efforts? Does this change over the pandemic?
May I interrupt for just a moment? The head of the National Park Service has just come here to talk to me, and I'm here in Madagascar, and I'm going to excuse myself for just a minute so that I can explain to him what I am doing. So I don't want to be rude, but I think I can't be rude to him either. So I'm going to step out for a minute.
Pat, could you please say hello to him for me, and that I hope to meet him in a few weeks when I get there.
I will. Okay. Hopefully I'll be back in a little while.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. Sorry, I lost it for 1 second. Okay, which areas are most crucial today to strengthen conservation efforts, and how does it change during the pandemic?
Which geographic areas, or
cross sector, yeah,
or sectoral, or not sure.
Think I don't know if Dominic is listening, but I think it's maybe the different conservation efforts geographically. Sorry.
Everywhere.
Well, but as Jonah said, like, we have to act now. We have to save what we have at the moment. Which do you consider is like the priorities areas to focus a lot of the conservation efforts right now?
Well, clearly, Mena Bay and Ankara are in major crisis mode, so there's no way around that. But every single natural area remaining, every piece of forest left in Madagascar
is globally important, not just nationally important, but globally important. That's the unique situation of Madagascar. But yes, clearly Menabe and Ankaranfantsika are in major crisis mode. So I would put them at the top of the list.
Okay.
I think I'd add to that too. There are other places where there is not as many people on the ground to know what's happening, right? So that are underrepresented and understudied in Madagascar, where we don't know, for example, with lemurs, how many lemurs are even on the ground, right? So I think at the same time, it's expanding our efforts out to looking at places which haven't received a lot of attention, but are large in size, have a lot of potential. And then no matter where you're working in Madagascar, making sure we're targeting our efforts in the right place in that location. And getting as close to inside the park, up against the park that we possibly can, and distributing our efforts in a way that has the biggest effect. Thank you.
If I can add something else, Lucia, before we run out of time, and that is we're talking about collaboration. What we're really trying to foster now is cross taxon collaboration among the specialist groups of the IUCN Species Survival Commission, and also other IUCN commissions like the World Commission on Protected Areas. But we have lots of members of the primate specialist group from Madagascar, and we're now, because we just finished the World Conservation Congress, so we're now renewing membership for the next quadrennium. So we're interested in adding new members. It's not a matter of you write and say you want to join. We need to have people who are actively engaged in conservation to become members. But there are many other specialist groups. There's plant specialist groups, there's reptile specialist groups, there's bird specialist groups. And we have created now through the Species Survival Commission what are called national specialist groups. And the one for Madagascar is being chaired by Tina Andriamanana from Fanambi, who you all know. And what we're trying to do with that is foster collaboration among the different members of the different specialist groups of IUCN. And we're going to hopefully, when COVID slows down a little bit and everyone can move freely, we want to hold a meeting in Madagascar of all the members of the different IUCN commissions, especially the different species survival commission specialist groups, so there can be cross-fertilization, because the chameleon people may be working in the same area as the primate people, but they don't talk to one another. And we really need to foster much more cross-fertilization. So that's a very important aspect of collaboration.
You stole our next question. We were going to refer to that and how we can actually bridge that gap between the specialist group and other big international conservation groups to more efforts on the ground, more communication, more aligned efforts, objectives, approaches. So thank you very much for responding that. Jonah, you wanted to say something, right?
What I would like to say is just like, not because we GERP manages the Marmisa new protected area, but Marmisa is a good example to show that if you can work very closely, nicely with the local community, you can at the same time make the difference, save the forest, save the lemurs, and help the people to improve their livelihood. During those last 5 years, we have had zero fire, zero charcoal, zero pressure, and that is because of the good collaboration with the local community. If that works in Marmisa, I know Marmisa is a tiny forest. Why not to the other forest, to the other side? And that's what we'd like to use as a model in other country. If when I am really take my responsibility as the IPS president, I would like to use the style of Marmisa to Africa, to Asia, because the problem is almost the same everywhere. So I would say it's question of working frankly with the local people. If I feel the responsibility, if I can see the benefit, not say, oh, you can get money that they can see the direct benefit from what they do to protect their forest, and say, I don't want I want to encourage people in Menabe, in Karanfanskia, everywhere when they're not to give up, not to give up. You have to move forward. Now it's not time to stop to give. You have to move to change by working together, having a collaboration, with the partners within the country and our partners outside the country, like
We lost him.
Oh, yes. There he is. He's back. Jonah, can you repeat that last sentence you said? Just we lost you for a second. Yeah, I think his internet connection is down. Okay, let's give him a few seconds. We wanted to ask one more last question. Now that the borders are opening up in Madagascar, and I know it's traveling back, it's a bit complicated, but it
okay,
will be...
okay.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. We can.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us?
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay, now it is not time to give up. We have to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonah. Now that the borders are opening up, what would you like to see in conservation different? Maybe Onja?
That's a very good question. I think if we learned one thing from this pandemic, or at least me, learned one thing from this COVID in Madagascar, is that we need Malagasy on the ground. A lot of us scientists doing research in Madagascar freaked out last year when the borders closed and we couldn't go to Madagascar. And we were like, what's gonna happen with our research? What's gonna happen with our, like the project we're doing in Madagascar, we cannot go. But then a lot of us who have been collaborating with Malagasy scientists based in Madagascar, we were able to continue our work, even we were not physically present in Madagascar. And so I think, and this goes to like everyone, I think that that would be like, that the change that we need to I think it goes back to what I said earlier, is like train more Malagasy, collaborate with Malagasy in Madagascar, because even if we don't go to Madagascar, we're still going to be able to do the work when we all have those collaborators who are based in Madagascar. So I want to say also, like, the Ministry of Environment made a call earlier about collaboration among Malagasy in Madagascar, and she also called the Malagasy from abroad to collaborate as well. And I want to reiterate that we need also the Malagasy diaspora to help with the conservation work in Madagascar. We've been having this mentality that if a Malagasy is not physically based in Madagascar, they don't have a voice, or they can help advance the science in Madagascar, which kind of, it's not true, because a lot of us does a lot of work in Madagascar, even if we're not there. And it's even easier for us because we can speak the language, and easier for us to collaborate with the Malagasy community. We found ways to communicate with Malagasy in many ways. There are like network of Malagasy abroad and in Madagascar. So it's super, like, I want to say, like, it's a little bit easy. I'm not saying that it's super, super easy, but it will be, so say having that mentality can like drive those Malagasy from abroad who want to help the conservation in Madagascar. So I would really want to reiterate that, like, we need to move away from that mentality and like encourage everyone. We need to work together. We need to collaborate among like many people, no matter where we are, no matter at what stage, no matter we're Malagasy or we're American, or no matter, like we need to collaborate. Like everyone needs to collaborate to advance lemur conservation in Madagascar and conservation of biodiversity in Madagascar in general, because Madagascar is not just known for lemurs, it's known for its mega biodiversity. I know we're talking about lemurs today because it's Lemur Week, but we're not just known for lemurs, we're known for a lot of the biodiversity that we have in Madagascar. So anyway.
Thank you very much. Sen will do a closing statement, but first we would like to really thank you all for such a great session. I think collaboration is a very trendy word, but as Jonah said, it's more complicated than that. And I think having these spaces where we can have multi-level stakeholders on lemur conservation is so important. And Lemur Conservation Network truly believes on the value of it. So we just want to reiterate how we're always here for further collaborations, giving a platform for all lemur conservation efforts and projects that are around, and we just have the doors very open for that. And just really want to thank you all. Sen?
Yeah, thank you, Lucia. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so with our discussion, we see that fostering collaboration is really needed. And it's also time to think about what collaboration means to us. I would like to say that as Malagasy citizens, researchers, Malagasy conservationists, we also need our voice to be heard, but that implies real motivation, hard work, involvement, and empowerment. I would love to see that after years of celebrating the World Lemur Festival, we as Malagasy will be really proud of what we have, what we accomplished for lemurs. And this is where I believe the colonization in conservation comes out. For me, it's really about taking ownership of the future for our own country. I think every action matters, every action counts to make things happen, to move forward, as we said, never give up. And most importantly, I think it's really time to work together, because it's only by working together and getting the best out of each collaboration, we could save lemurs from extinction. So thank you very much. And yeah, this is my what I would like to say to sum up here.
Thank you very much all for coming on today. And I thank you again for such great panelists and for this great discussion.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sehenu. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Cortni. Thank you, Unja. Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Veluma.
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 Thanks to you all for all of your hard work, and to everybody who's listening as well, because I know there's a lot of work going on out there we're not hearing. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank